The disappearance of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, the mother of Today's Show host Savannah Guthrie. It's now been more than a month since Guthrie was taken from her Catalina Foothills home in Tucson. Investigators are now looking at a damaged utility box near her home that may be linked to a local internet outage around the time she vanished. Police say that outage could have disrupted nearby surveillance cameras and possibly affecting video evidence. Local and federal agencies are still working through thousands of leads. Authorities say they're getting closer to a breakthrough, but much of the investigation is still confidential.
In the high desert of Arizona, silence isn't just the absence of sound. It's a weight. It's the feeling of 1,000 acres of sand and scrub brush watching you. On the morning of February 1st, 2026, that silence was broken. Not by a scream, but by the soft click of a back door propped open. A front porch stained with a dark, directional swipe of red, and a Nest doorbell camera ripped from its housing, dangling by its wires like a severed nerve. 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie was gone. She didn't wander off. She didn't leave a note. She was taken from her bed, leaving behind her heart medication, her shoes, and her wallet. For 58 days, the world has whispered two names. Savannah, the famous daughter, the face of morning television, the woman whose $8 million a year life was suddenly shattered by a 2,300-mile phone call. And Tommaso, the son-in-law, the man who drove the blue Honda, the last person confirmed to have seen Nancy alive. These two names have become the twin sons of this investigation. Every theory orbits them. Every comment section dissects them. But in the shadows of this timeline, there is a third name. A name that appears in the margins of every police report, yet remains unexamined by the headlines. She isn't the celebrity in New York. She isn't the man behind the wheel of the impounded SUV. She is the one who lives 10 minutes away, the one who shared Nancy's final dinner, the one who found the blood on the porch, the one whose home the FBI walked out of carrying paper grocery bags and white trash bags, wearing blue protective gloves while the cameras rolled. Her name is Annie Guthrie. And tonight, we are going to do something no one else has dared to do. We aren't here to accuse. We aren't here to join the internet's mindless lynch mob. We are here to look at the geography, the proximity, and the verified facts that the world has ignored. Because once you see Annie's place in this timeline, you will realize that while Savannah is the voice of this case, Annie might just be the key. If you've been following the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, if you know the names Savannah and Tommaso by heart, then this deep dive is for you. Before we go into the desert, drop your location in the comments below. Let us know where you're watching from. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This is a story about the daughter who was closest to the flame, and why she is the most important witness we've never heard from. This is the kidnapping of Nancy Guthrie, and it's time to talk about Annie. Before we step into the night of January 31st, we must address the facts. Law enforcement has been clear. On February 16th, Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos formally cleared all siblings and spouses, Savannah, Annie, Cameron, Tommaso, and Michael. They passed polygraph tests. Their searches were consensual. Nancy Grace has defended them. This channel does not implicate Annie Guthrie in a crime. But clearing a name in a legal sense does not remove a person from the timeline. It does not erase the fact that Annie Guthrie was the primary architect of Nancy's daily life. To understand the disappearance, you have to understand the map. Savannah Guthrie lives in New York City. She works at Rockefeller Plaza. When the nightmare began, she was a world away. Cameron Guthrie, the retired F-16 pilot, was across the country. But Annie lives in Tucson. Annie was 10 minutes away. She breathed the same desert air as her mother every single day. She knew the routines. She knew which doors stuck in their frames. She knew which neighbors watched the street and which ones kept their blinds drawn. In any investigation, proximity is context. And in this case, the proximity begins at a dinner table on the final night of Nancy's known life. At 5:32 p.m. on January 31st, Nancy Guthrie stepped into an Uber. She was headed to Annie's house. For 4 hours, Nancy sat inside that home. She played games. She ate dinner. She talked. Think about those 4 hours. That is the last extended period of time any witness spent with Nancy. Annie was there, sitting across from her. She could see if Nancy was anxious. She would know if Nancy mentioned a strange phone call, a new contractor, or a face she didn't recognize in the neighborhood. Annie saw the version of Nancy that the world didn't, the 84-year-old woman with a failing heart and a bad back. At 9:45 p.m., Tommaso drove Nancy home in that blue Honda CR-V. He walked her to the door. He watched her go inside. And then the world went dark. 6 hours later, Nancy would be gone, and the first person to realize it wasn't the police. It wasn't a neighbor. It was Annie. When Nancy failed to show up for a Sunday morning church live stream, the alarm was raised. Annie and Tommaso raced to the house in the foothills. They arrived at 11:00 a.m. What they found was a house that had been transformed into a tomb. The back doors were propped open, a detail that suggests someone wanted a quick exit. The phone was there. The wallet was there. The shoes, the ones Nancy needed to walk more than a few feet, were still inside. And then Annie did something remarkable. Before the forensics were back, before the FBI arrived, Annie defined the crime. She told investigators, this is not a wander-off. She explained her mother's physical pain, her inability to walk to the mailbox on a bad day. She handed the authorities a conclusion. This was an abduction. Retired detectives have noted this sequence. Usually, the investigation builds a conclusion. Here, the family provided the frame, and the investigation stepped inside it. Annie was the first on the scene. Annie made the first call. Annie gave the first assessment. She shaped the first hour of the search. And yet, while Savannah gives the interviews, Annie remains in the quiet 10 minutes away. But the quiet didn't last. On day 11, the FBI arrived at Annie's front door. Reporters watched from the street as agents moved inside. When they came out, they weren't empty-handed. They carried a paper grocery sack, a white trash bag. They took the mail from the box. One agent was still wearing blue latex gloves, the universal sign that what they were holding was potential evidence. Why search Annie's home if she was just the daughter who found the scene? Because Annie's home was the last place Nancy Guthrie felt safe. It was the last place her DNA was left voluntarily. The FBI wasn't just searching for a suspect. They were searching for a trail. What was in those bags? What did the mail tell them? The silence from the Bureau has been deafening. But as we are about to see in the next chapter, the search didn't stop at the front door. It moved into the vehicles. It moved into the desert washes. And it moved into a series of discoveries that will make you question everything you think you know about the stranger who took Nancy Guthrie. The silence of the Catalina foothills is deceptive. It suggests a landscape that holds no memory, where the wind erases tracks as quickly as they are made. But for the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Department, the memory of January 31st wasn't in the sand. It was in the machines. The blue Honda CR-V became the most scrutinized character in this tragedy. It belongs to Annie and Tommaso. It is the vessel that carried Nancy Guthrie on the final 3 miles of her known life. On any other Saturday, it was a family car, a space for groceries, car seats, and Sunday trips. But on the morning of February 1st, it became a forensic vault. Investigators didn't just look at the seats, they dismantled the vehicle. They stripped the door panels. They pulled the carpet. They hooked the onboard computers to diagnostic suites that mapped every acceleration, every hard brake, and every GPS coordinate recorded by the car's internal brain. As of day 58, that car has not returned to Annie's driveway. While the family's personal vehicles were released, the CR-V remained in a secure bay, reassembled under the watchful eye of law enforcement mechanics. The official word from investigators like Dave Mack is that nothing of substance was found. No blood, no struggle, no DNA that shouldn't have been there. But then why hold it? Former SWAT commanders and FBI analysts suggest the answer lies in the chain of custody. In a case this high profile, with a victim this vulnerable and a family this prominent, nothing has to be proven 1,000 times over. The car is being held not because it hides a crime, but because it must be preserved as a pristine record of Nancy's final movements, a shield against any future defense attorney who might claim the investigation was sloppy. Yet, as the car sat in a cold garage, the heat was rising in the desert washes behind Annie's home. Tucson is a city defined by its washes, the dry riverbeds that carve through neighborhoods, filling with flash flood waters during the monsoon and acting as natural highways for wildlife and occasionally for those who wish to remain unseen. On March 12th, the narrative shifted from the driveway to the dirt. An independent investigator, scouring the rugged terrain near Annie and Tommaso's property, stopped. In the brush of a wash, he found a pair of tan pants and a medical knee brace. He photographed them, the images flickering across social media like a signal fire. Nancy Guthrie was known to wear similar clothing. She was 84. She had mobility issues. 16 days later, another discovery. A woman's shirt, possibly nightwear, found in the same general area. Then more clothing, dark garments tangled in the desert scrub. 3 separate discoveries, 1 wash, 1 proximity. The logic of the desert is brutal. If you want to dispose of evidence in a way that allows the earth to do the work for you, you put it in a wash. You wait for the rain to bury it in sediment or the wind to scatter it into the cactus. But the professional assessment remains cautious. Experts like Jennifer Coffindaffer have pointed out the gaps. Nancy was likely taken in her pajamas, not tan pants. There is no record of a knee brace in her medical history, only a pacemaker. Is the wash a dumping ground, or is it simply a collection point for the debris of a border-adjacent community? Desert washes are often littered with the discarded lives of travelers, hikers, and the homeless. The question isn't just what was found, but why it was found there, behind the home of the daughter who lived closest to the victim. As investigators combed the brush, they found something even more chilling in a dilapidated building nearby: smuggler shoes. These are primitive but effective tools, carpet-soled footwear designed to be slipped over regular shoes to smudge footprints, leaving nothing but a blurred, unrecognizable texture in the dust. When crime scene investigator Cheryl McCollum looked at the Guthrie porch, her first question was, where are the footprints? There was blood, 4 distinct patterns of it, but no drag marks, no scuffing, no sign of a boots-on-the-ground struggle. The discovery of footprint-eliminating gear in the vicinity of the 2 most important houses in this case created a haunting convergence. Did the kidnapper know the terrain? Did he know how to move through the washes behind Annie's house without leaving a trail? The profile of the suspect began to sharpen. This wasn't a professional hit from out of state. This was someone local, someone who knew the Catalina foothills, someone who knew that Nancy Guthrie's Nest camera didn't have an active subscription, that the blinking green light was a lie. Who possesses that kind of granular knowledge? Who knows the digital vulnerabilities of an 84-year-old woman's home? The investigation has turned inward, not toward the family's guilt, but toward the family's circle. Every contractor, every landscaper, every person who ever stepped foot in that house was now under the microscope. Because the answer to how a woman vanishes in 41 minutes without a footprint isn't found in the headlines. It's found in the details that only those closest to her could know. And as day 60 approaches, the silence from the daughter 10 minutes away is the loudest sound in the desert. The wooden planks of Nancy Guthrie's front porch should have told a story of a struggle. Instead, they whispered a sequence of movements so precise, they felt choreographed. When forensic expert Cheryl McCollum analyzed the scene, she didn't just see blood. She saw a map of a 41-minute window that defied the logic of a standard abduction. There were 4 distinct patterns left behind in the dark, 90-degree drops, the kind that falls straight from a stationary source, consistent with a sudden nosebleed or a blunt impact. Medium to high velocity spatter, the fine mist that occurs when someone coughs or gasps under duress. A transfer print, the chilling outline of a hand pressed firmly against the surface. And finally, a directional swipe. But it's what wasn't there that haunted the investigation. No footprints, no scuff marks from a heavy boot, no drag marks indicating a body being pulled across the wood. It was as if the suspect had levitated, or as we now know from the discoveries in the desert, as if they had worn something designed to erase their very existence from the dust. McCollum's conclusion was startling. This wasn't a team. This wasn't a cartel or a professional kidnapping ring. Factually, the evidence dictated a lone wolf. One person, working alone, in a home they knew well enough to navigate in the dark. This suspect planned the beginning, but they clearly didn't know the ending. They knew how to enter through the back. They knew where Nancy slept. But once the crime began, the professionalism evaporated. They spent 41 minutes inside, an eternity in the world of abductions. They lingered. They manipulated flowers on the porch. They made a strange C-shaped gesture toward a camera they had already tried to disable. They were young, likely under 30, and their violence was a choice, not a necessity. But as the profile of the killer sharpened, the image of the man leading the hunt began to blur. Sheriff Chris Nanos, the man who cleared the Guthrie family on day 16, now finds himself at the center of a different kind of storm. The Pima County Sheriff's Department is in revolt. A unanimous vote of no confidence has been passed by the deputies' union. A recall petition is circulating. Nanos is being forced to testify under oath about his department's handling of cases, facing accusations of being vain and vindictive from his own former colleagues. The question hanging over Tucson isn't just where is Nancy, it's was the clearance premature. When a sheriff's judgment is under formal institutional challenge, every decision he made in the first 3 weeks of the case is suddenly back on the table. Did the FBI truly vet the daughter 10 minutes away? Did they cross-reference Annie's phone pings with the smuggler's shoes found in the wash? Or did they inherit a conclusion of family innocence from a department more interested in managing a celebrity-linked crisis than conducting a cold, hard forensic audit? The pressure is no longer just on the kidnapper to surface. It is on the authorities to prove they didn't look away from the most obvious witnesses because they were blinded by the glare of Savannah's fame. Because while the lone wolf may have been the one on the porch, the information he used, the knowledge of the dead camera, the mobility of the victim, and the layout of the foothills, had to come from somewhere. And in the desert, secrets don't stay buried forever. They travel through the washes, waiting for the next rain to bring them to the surface. If this deep dive is keeping you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to like and subscribe. We are uncovering the layers of the Guthrie case that the mainstream media won't touch. Drop a "still here" in the comments if you're following the timeline. In the modern world, we live under the illusion of constant surveillance. We point plastic lenses at our driveways and sleep soundly, believing every movement is being etched into a cloud server miles away. But at Nancy Guthrie's home, that security was a mirage, a digital hollow that someone somewhere understood with terrifying precision. The Nest doorbell camera was the silent witness that failed. It sat on the doorframe, its green light perhaps flickering, its lens aimed directly at the porch where the blood would eventually be found. But Nancy Guthrie had no active subscription. The camera was a shell. It was recording, but it wasn't saving. It wasn't live in the way a modern security system is supposed to be. It took the FBI 8 days of digital archaeology, digging into Google's back-end servers, to recover the fragments of what happened that night. 8 days where the kidnapper had a head start because the eye in the sky was effectively blind. This raises a question that cuts through the heart of the lone wolf theory. Who knew the camera was a decoy? To know that a security system is lapsed requires more than a casual glance from the street. It requires intimacy. It requires being close enough to the victim to know her tech habits, or her lack of them. It requires knowing that the woman inside wasn't checking her phone for alerts, because there were no alerts to send. The suspect on the porch tried to cover the camera, but he didn't smash it. He didn't rip it from the wall until he was already finished. His behavior suggests a strange half-knowledge. He knew he should hide, but he didn't seem to realize that the footage he was so desperate to hide from wasn't even being stored on a local hard drive. And this is where the information architecture of the case leads us back to the daughter 10 minutes away. Annie Guthrie was the one who managed the granular details of Nancy's life. She was the one there on a Tuesday afternoon when the Wi-Fi went down. She was the one who knew if the batteries in the smoke detector were chirping, or if the doorbell was actually linked to an account. This isn't a suggestion of malice. It is a reality of caregiving. The person who cares for the elderly becomes the keeper of their digital keys. But knowledge is a leak. It travels through conversations, through casual mentions to contractors, or through the observation of anyone who spent enough time in that orbit to realize the security was just plastic and glass. As we approach day 60, the psychological weight on the Guthrie family is transitioning from shock to a grueling, permanent state of high alert. Savannah returned to the Today Show on April 6th, her face a mask of professional resolve, but her words were a plea. She apologized to Tommaso by name. She defended Annie with a ferocity that only a sister can summon. She believes the fame she spent 20 years building is the reason her mother is gone. She believes the spotlight she commands was the beacon that drew the lone wolf to that quiet porch in Tucson. But while Savannah looks at the spotlight, the investigators are looking at the shadows. They are looking at the 41 minutes the suspect spent inside. They are looking at the smuggler's shoes in the wash. And they are looking at the daughter who remains the primary source for every fact we think we know about the morning the world changed. The answer to this case may not be a person. It may be a piece of information that was whispered in the wrong ear, 10 minutes away from the scene of the crime. It is easy to build a case out of shadows, to look at proximity and see a plot. But a true investigation does not just look for what fits, it looks for what breaks. And when we apply the same forensic pressure to the theory of family involvement, the evidence doesn't just bend, it shatters. The most powerful weapon in the Guthrie family's defense isn't a high-priced lawyer or a public relations firm. It is the FBI's own methodology. On day 16, every family member was cleared. For 58 days, a 24-person task force has sifted through 40,000 tips. They have analyzed every digital footprint and every microscopic fiber. And in 2 months of the most intense scrutiny imaginable, not one forensic finding has pointed back to the dinner table at Annie's house. Consider the consent search. This is a detail that legal experts like Jennifer Coffindaffer point to as the ultimate proof of innocence. If the FBI had even a shred of probable cause, a single suspicious text, a strange bank transfer, a witness placing a family member at the scene, they would not have asked for permission. They would have arrived with a warrant signed by a judge. The fact that Annie, Tommaso, and Savannah gave the FBI total access to their homes, their phones, and their cars without a fight tells you everything about their state of mind. You don't hand over your life to the Bureau if you have something to hide in the backyard. Then there are the polygraphs. Annie and Tommaso didn't just take them, they passed with flying colors. While polygraphs aren't a silver bullet, they are a powerful tool for gauging the physiological response of a grieving heart versus a guilty conscience. And finally, we have the words of Savannah herself. On March 26th, standing before a national audience, she didn't just defend her sister, she canonized her. She spoke of Annie as the primary caregiver, the one who bore the daily weight of their mother's aging with grace. To believe in a conspiracy is to believe that Savannah Guthrie, a woman who has spent her career identifying deception, is either the victim of a world-class lie or a participant in one. Neither fits the woman the public has known for decades. But if the family is innocent, as the evidence overwhelmingly suggests, we are left with the haunting reality of the lone wolf. A man who was young, a man who was local, a man who knew exactly when Nancy would be alone and exactly which camera wouldn't catch him. He didn't need to be in the family to know their secrets. He only needed to be watching from the desert. He may have been a contractor who worked on the house, a neighbor who noticed the routine, or a stalker who used the internet to map a target. The tragedy of proximity is that it creates opportunity for strangers as much as it creates suspicion for loved ones. Annie Guthrie remains the silent center of this storm. She is the one who saw Nancy's last smile over dinner. She is the one who walked into the house and saw the propped doors. She is the one who told the police she didn't wander off. The answer to this case likely lives in a memory Annie hasn't realized is important yet. A face in the grocery store, a car idling at the end of the cul-de-sac, a question asked by a stranger that seemed innocent at the time. The information is there, buried under the trauma of the last 58 days. As Savannah returns to the anchor desk and the reward climbs to over $1 million, the foothills remain quiet. But the desert is a patient witness. It holds the smuggler's shoes, the tan pants in the wash, and the secret of where Nancy Guthrie was taken in those 41 minutes of darkness. We are left with one final question, the one that keeps investigators up at night. If the kidnapper knew enough to hide from a camera that wasn't even recording, who else is he watching right now? The search for Nancy Guthrie is not over. If you have any information, no matter how small, call 1-800-CALL-FBI. A family is waiting for an answer. A community is waiting for justice. And a daughter is waiting to finally break the silence of the desert. Thank you for walking through this investigation with us. This case is a reminder that the truth is often found in the names we haven't spent enough time talking about. If you found this deep dive important, please like the video, share it with your true crime community, and subscribe to Crime Secrets Exposed. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a chapter in the cases that matter most. Until next time, hug the people you love tomorrow, because tonight the desert is still keeping its secrets.